going to be like a little lag second of when I'm live. So give me just a moment because I want to get the link into.
You tell me when can I hit got it? We're good. Live stream.
I'm also going to start recording. I think we're live. So 1 moment. And then when I'm live. Okay, there we are. 1 moment. Okay. All right, we're good. Well, welcome back everyone to the Luna Den channel. Today we have our friend Cal joining us. I have Ben with me also. This is great. This is a great setup for me to have a partner interviewer. Ben is much more experienced with interviewing. I am going to set the stage with that because Ben, you're really great with this and you're just really fun to have conversations with. I got a lot of great feedback from our conversation with you and Joyce. So I'm excited to have you back on. So thank you. And Cal, since Ben's introduced himself, we'll let you introduce yourself and we'll get right into the topic as we were just speaking about.
Yeah. So thank you for inviting me here. But my name's Cal Arnold, or I go by Caleb. I'm in part of the CCA cohort 2. I was drawn to it through Nixmas, and I own a few businesses in Montana. Currently, I'm in northern Minnesota, a little bit waterlogged and yeah, I'm just going to share a little bit of how the CCA has affected me in these last months.
Yeah, and Cal is just an overall great human to be around. You just have great energy, bring good energy to the room. I've always felt like any event I've been at, when you're there, you just bring a really present energy, and I love that about you. So we were just talking a little bit before we went live about this relearning how to learn. So tell us what that means for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in the last 20 years, anything that I've taken on as knowledge, I've tried to apply, but I'm also competitive in personality. And I think that's a similarity a lot of us share in the cohort, but I would learn things or read about something and I would kind of file it away. The metaphor, the analogy I use is if it was a tool that I learned, I just kind of throw it into a pile of tools. The CCA, the way I've been relearning how to learn in this with the group is more reflection, more journaling about something, slowing down, not being competitive in nature. Like, oh, I read 4 books this month or 5 books this month. It's more about taking that time, ingesting it, digesting it, metabolizing it, putting it into a case in point, or someone in the group using it as a case in point. It shines light to it in a different way, and it really anchors in something for me. And then again, going back to the toolbox analogy, it's like hanging that tool up nice and neat so I know where to go get it when I need it. So it's completely changed the way I've learned. Right away, in the first class, I think, we had learned being useful over valid. And I was checking, and I was taking everybody's time, just checking the validity or my understanding. Like, I wanted everyone to know that I understood what we were talking about. And I think traditionally and historically in a lot of classes and environments we have, it's like everybody trying to kind of outdo the other person in proving their understanding. And really in CCA, for me, it was a vulnerable, safe environment where everybody was like, hey, we're investing in ourselves. Now we're going to be sponges on this side of the table. And we're going to listen and learn. And as Nick would say, be the dumbest person in the room. Approaching it from that, it was tough for me. It took me a few classes, and then it's like, okay, shut up and listen. Nobody cares how valid you are or what you're understanding. Yeah. So that was a big takeaway right off the bat. And I think I even brought it up as a first case in point. It's like, hey guys, this is where I overstepped. I was bringing up something up to check for understanding and wanted you all know that I understood something, but I wasted 5-10 minutes of our useful time. So that was kind of that cut me from the knees right away. And I was like, oh man, I'm doing that to myself. And then I think the frequency, the journaling, and revisiting it, and just being like open to the open loop learning, it was completely different. But I wish if I could go back 20 years, if I would have started learning the way that I've been learning to learn through the CCA, it would be astronomically different.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Cal, one thing, like we are obviously in the same cohort, so we've been fortunate enough to spend time together in person at the summits and things like that as well. And I noticed, probably haven't told you this, I noticed what Courtney noticed is that, your impact on the room with your, generosity and how serious also how self-aware, and you're constantly making reflection on how to really get the most out of the program and how to help other people and show up for other people and things like that. And I just wonder if you wouldn't, we over dinner one time, I think, or off to the side, you were told Joyce and I a bit about, some of your past and how you're even sitting here with us today. And I wonder if you wouldn't mind sharing some of that, because I know it's not, maybe it was before your time in CCA, but I see the way that you show up in CCA with this kind of thirst for life and for helping other people, and applying the principles. And I also seen you like come into your own with some of the questions you've asked Nick and things, just about being yourself and like being who you are and like being authentic to yourself and playing your game is a thing we always talk about, right? So I wonder if you wouldn't share a little more background. I know you're a serial entrepreneur. We know you're doing you're used to doing a million things, and we get to Cal, for example. Cal's the guy that gets in to the summit the night before at like 1 a.m. and then there's it starts at 9 or something. There's breakfast at 8, and then people get to breakfast at 8:15 or something. And Cal's there, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I was up at 6, and I did a full a 10-mile walk around Seattle, and then I was at the gym, and then I went to get coffee here. I brought Blake a coffee, and then and everyone's like, what, you know what I mean, kind of thing." And if you knew even what Cal sometimes deals with too, it's like it floors you. He's got this unlimited energy, So I wonder, Cal, if you wouldn't give a little more context and what you've been through in the past, and maybe how it is that you show up that way for everyone else.
Yeah, this could go a lot of different ways, but one, I got you fooled. Yeah, I think what drew me into the CCA right away is like preventing yourself from blowing up. And that struck a note with me. And I was like, I do go really hard. And I started to identify as that person. That's just what Cal does. Cal goes. And I, at that moment, knew like, hey, if I don't figure out another way to do this, I will blow myself up. And that was the initial, that's what drew me in. I struggle with it still today, from day one of CCA to now. It's still an ongoing thing that I will constantly, infinitely be working on. But I think being in proximity to a lot of people that understand it as well, I'm able to slow my roll and leave open loops and work with one was guilt. I'll just share that testimony. And I would go away, and let's say I'd go to a summit, I'd come back and I have all my workers, my employees, and I have guilt for just being gone, even though I'm I'm in it to invest in the company, for everybody. My investment into myself invested in the company. And the first application of open loop thinking I was like, okay, I need to, I wrote down that night, why do I feel guilty right now after leaving and doing this? And I left it open, and I woke up in the morning, and the answer was there, and my servo mechanism, or this open loop thinking, had answered it. Was, I feel like all my employees are doing my job, when in fact they're doing their job. And it was just like a quick little sentence answered everything for me. And I say that just because I'm relearning how to learn. I'm relearning how to like have some restraint, I guess is the word we talk a lot about, and practicing that and being okay with it. Being cautious with my identity too, as in like the guy that just goes, the guy that, I mean, I don't necessarily need to go to every summit and be the guy that goes to the gym before I enter for breakfast, but that is a bit of my game as well. So it's kind of acknowledging both of those. I'm at
Cal, you said something. I want to go back because you were talking about blowing yourself up. I'm curious because it's something that we talk about a lot, and I think it's really important, that piece of how not to blow yourself up. But if you would be open to sharing any experiences or examples of what that looked like prior to even knowing that as to now, if that makes sense. So like what were the ways that you could see yourself in essence blowing yourself up, and how has that shifted?
The quick answer is like creating dependency on myself, even if it was false. Like it needs me to move forward. This business needs me. I had to have a part in everything. And some talk, that recently Dan and I have had is the 70-30. Like I need to be okay being a beneficiary in a lot of ways in businesses or what I'm involved in, but I always had to kind of lead the way and go. And I took on so much responsibility and really just no trust in a lot of people that they were going to do it up to my expectations. So I would just step in and do that. How I got to the point of doing too much is kind of a story in itself, because I have lived both sides of this lifestyle. I was in, extreme skiing and backcountry hunting, and I would take hundreds of days off a year. And I had what I thought my business was running on its own with its systems, but it was in a slow decline. So I have some scar tissue from that, because when I was then in a plane crash, which nearly killed me and took me out of I was intubated for a week and I was in a hospital for 30 days and 2 years of surgeries. But what I did, instead of directing my energy into the skiing and the backcountry and the hunting and everything else, I put it right into my businesses, and I put a bunch of balls in the air. I got so many things going because I redirected my energy there. And I realized that all of those balls in the air required me, and it required me to be holding them all up. And so I'd really pushed really hard. And at the point that I realized that I was going to blow myself up was the time that the CCA entered my life. And it was like, oh, this is perfect timing. I was reaching out for coaches or whatever I could get. So I don't know how that would have turned out ultimately if I wouldn't have found this, and even this new way of learning. But I know that's very general, but it was.
No, Cal, I think it's really helpful. I'm glad you shared that. I know it's obviously a personal thing that you went through with a plane crash. You survived the plane crash, first of all, right? And before that, like you said, I've seen some of your videos, your skiing videos and stuff. I mean, the stuff that Cal did is great. I mean, like the stuff that you see on like YouTube, crazy ski tricks, like stuff like that. And doing all those extreme sports and things, and even just the extreme outdoor stuff that you do and survival stuff, and then surviving a plane crash, all that you went through there while being an entrepreneur. I know it's been really inspiring for the rest of the group to hear that story, and then also to watch. The thing I know just for me with CCA that's so different from anything else is just how unique it is for every single person. It's not like Nick and Dan are this thing, and then everyone's trying to become like that thing. You know what I mean? So even a lot of the concepts, like the solvable problem, is something that we talk about a lot. And Courtney, I know you talk about that in Luna Den, right? And I remember, Kyle, you were asking a question to Nick at the summit, and he was talking about like to your own unique disposition, right? And how like for someone like yourself, for example, you may never be satisfied with just like one like steady plan of this thing here. When you look at your whole life about extreme sports and all this stuff, you know what I mean? It's just a matter of, but also having that awareness about, blowing yourself up, like you said, versus like someone else it's totally different advice, you know what I mean? Versus just all trying to become into this like cookie cutter thing. And I think that to me is like the most transformational when I see people like, oh, I can be me, that's when I see that difference that each people kind of recognizes.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I was to lend on that or piggyback onto that, like the CCA, like you said, it's not just Dan and Nick's. They've cultivated this to bring the people in, and it creates such a special experience for everybody. So where you and I can have this conversation, this is a normal conversation for you and I to have, Ben.
Yeah.
And it's this happens all the time, and it's all based on, I guess, being okay with being self-aware, being vulnerable, having that safe environment to be like, well, this is who I am. I tend to push really hard because I'm have this extreme background. Now, maybe let me know if you see something that could be damaging, as I go forward this way. It's like being able to be vulnerable in a group and is incredible. It's it's a great experience. We're not out here trying to fit into some confinement that we think we're supposed to be. That has been really disarms you, checks egos at the door, and then it expedites the learning process. Not to wrap this all around back to relearning how to learn, but what you said there, Ben, is you nailed it. It's it's not set up for one certain person. And we also get a lot from it, right? Like your case in points or Courtney's case in points, I'm like, oh, that hit perfect. Where maybe I received a case in point from someone else, or maybe it was my own, where it didn't really resonate. So having that frequency and that exposure, like every single lesson will say in a different light, creates a different, just with new light, there's a little bit more, you retain it differently. And I guess I'm kind of running circles around it, but I guess I'm flattered a little bit that my energy comes off that way. But also it's a self-recognition of like, that's my whole life. Everyone's like, well, that's just what Cal does. That's how Cal does it. Even from the plane crash, I ended up with an amputation. I bounced back in a year and a half, and it was like, oh, that's just who Cal is. Like Cal's climbing mountains.
Okay, so Cal, you shared it. I didn't want to say, so you shared it. So like I said, what I was sharing, Cal walking 10 miles around Seattle at 6 a.m., whatever. Again, he's doing this with an amputation in one of his legs, right? And you have us, like the rest of us, maybe, sleeping in until 7:30 or something like that, And Cal's been in the gym and gone on a walk, and he's brought people coffee and stuff like that too. So like I just said, like, going through that, and some of this is just who you have always been. But going through that plane crash, having with your companies, coming back so fast from it, and then, seeking out CCA. I just wonder, like, maybe something you could share is that you kind of touched on this a little bit, where you were headed before CCA, because, it seems like maybe, like you said, maybe you had so much, you lost something to some degree when you went through the plane crash, and you had so much, you're like, maybe, I haven't had a near-death experience like that, right? And so whether you're trying to make the most out of life or whatever it is, you're trying to make up for something, and you're going so hard. What do you think things would have been like if you didn't find CCA, and how has that specifically changed that path?
Yeah. I redirected my energy in like out of a wheelchair. Like if it would have been into the mountains or to went into some extreme sport activity. And I was I've always liked and loved business, but I redirected it to business. And I guess I just thought that that's how you went about it. You just go hard, you work hard, you grind, and that's how you become successful. And that's how you get what you want. Yes, some of that was habitually rewarded, but I'm going to use a bit of an analogy here to explain it. How I would go down and cut down a tree is the hammer, and the hammer was what represents the grind. I would go out and I would hammer on that tree for 2 days until it fell down, and then I was rewarded because it got the job done. So on the top of my tool chest was always the hammer. So I would go back and I would get the hammer and I'd go do it again. I'm working way too hard and to get the job done because I don't have the right tool. I haven't done a case in point on the saw, or I haven't learned the right way, or maybe the saw went to the bottom of the tool chest and I have no idea where it's at in some quick pass reading. But now I know, like, I have a saw or a hatchet there that's been shined up and it's ready to go. I can go out and cut a tree down in 2 hours. That's where I've slowed down, where the CCA's helped me. That's at the end. How I just knew that the hammer wasn't the right job all the time, like the hard work, putting it in. So the CCA has been huge for
I think
me in that.
it's interesting you touch on that, Cal, because I know there are so many, well, I mean, like, of course, entrepreneurs, but I mean, just like humans in general, like creating identities for ourselves that success needs, we grind really hard. So almost that like our identity is built on the effort we put in, like the grind we put in order to create whatever result, as opposed to just like enjoying the experience and the process of doing something we love. And I mean, there's many other like contrary examples I can give to that, but it's really highlighted to me because I see it in myself as like, if I didn't work hard enough for something, oh, then I'm not worthy of having it, or whatever belief comes there. And that was a huge piece of CCA for me. And actually in consistent conversation with Nick is him consistently highlighting like, nobody cares how hard you had to work to earn X, Y, and Z. Like that actually doesn't matter at all, but we've created such a massive emphasis on it. And I mean, I see it a lot in like entrepreneurship, and I'm sure we can find it in so many different arenas of life, but I'm glad you touch on this, because I think in that place is where we find out who we really are without all of these extra. And if I'm hearing you correctly, that's kind of what I'm hearing you touch on, is like letting Cal be Cal without the need for all of that, like grind really hard identity stuff you had placed on yourself, whether it be from the plane crash, or even if you had some of that prior to, maybe that was a part of like this liberating experience of CCA for you, is getting to do life in a way where you don't have to work so hard to earn the enjoyment and appreciation of it.
Absolutely. It's a continuing practice right now for me. It's like I haven't arrived at that, like, oh, I'm getting there, but every day it's better.
As we never will. Like the arrival is not really the goal, right?
It's an infinite. You nailed it with like, there's some of that was there before, and then I layered another level of it on, and I was getting results from it. But then I started to identify under that go grind. That's just how hard I work. I put in this many hours, and that was kind of me creating a new identity, a new extreme identity within work. And that's, now I'm backing out of it with restraint. One just testimony right off the bat is like, if I give myself that time, just that open space to think, that's when the gold comes. And now I write it down. I have these ideas that are going to get me a lot further than the grind, if I just like am tactful about how I implement them and have some strategy. It's going to get me a lot farther. I have to trust in time, which was one of my 6-word updates, or let time do the heavy lifting, and trust in less. Like, these are all things that came out of the CCA for me. And it's like, that's probably 3 pages condensed down to 6 words or 5 words or whatever it is. That process of learning has helped me out a lot too. And we keep touching on this, but it's self-awareness. I think that is the most optimal point of any growth that you could ever have in your life. It gives you an advantage over everything. If you have self-awareness of who you are, where your blind spots are, where your biases are, that gives you the platform to launch a rocket. It's like, and that's been huge for me.
Yes.
It's kind of like breaking up that identity.
Something that like actually just hit me and like actually just landed now from this conversation, which is actually really, that's why these conversations are so great. Like, Courtney, you do actually a lot of content lately about like the state of being, right? Of just being and living it, versus, like you said, just like coming on. And that's what we talk about, is different than CCA. It's not just like regurgitating a bunch of like academic principles, for example, or things like that to follow just blindly. And what you kind of shared there, Cal, like I think what I realized just even now with CCA, ultimately what the goal of it all is stripping away all this stuff and just really being who you naturally are, and then having this trust and faith that that's actually going to be the thing that makes you the most successful and happiest. And so, like, to your point, even it doesn't seem related, but the start of this call, you shared how early on in CCA, you felt yourself trying to like prove yourself and prove that you were getting it and prove that you were smart or validate yourself. It's the same thing that Courtney was just sharing with, like, trying to show how hard we work, or our employees, like making sure our employees don't know we're away because they have to think that we're working hard, because if we're not like working hard as them or harder than our employees, then we don't deserve to be the boss, or we don't deserve to have the rewards, the profits, or whatever it is. If we don't prove to the CCA cohort that we're knowledgeable, that we're doing our homework, that we're whatever, like all this stuff that actually it's not even ourselves, right? And it's like proving, validating, like grinding, all this stuff, like let everyone see how hard I'm working, versus just because we don't believe that actually if we're just actually ourselves, that we'll actually be happy and successful from just being ourselves, And so it's amazing to kind of hear the different experiences, totally different experiences, kind of end up in the same place.
I have to remind myself every morning, like, that I don't get to hold my happiness hostage for when the checklist is completed, when your health is perfect, when everything in life is right, when that moment, because when isn't going to be there. And by the time you reach when, you've already moved the goalpost on yourself. So you don't even know you've got there. So you don't get to hold your happiness hostage for that moment. It's right now. It's that moment will never be as clear as that was when I snapped my fingers. Like, it's now. This is the clarity that, like, this is what the process of it is. Like, I have to enjoy this and trust that time will do the heavy lifting, and everything that, the things that I have in place are appropriately placed, we'll say, or there's a little bit of strategy to it. But yeah, I mean, that just to add on to it, and there's a lot, the buzzwords is, be present and, be in the now. But there's some truth to that. There's just different languages for trying to say the same thing. But that is one thing that I really, tying that to being self-aware and like in this moment is also, I tie that to being yourself a lot. Like, what do I want to do right now? What do I feel like doing right now? It's a struggle though. It's not, sometimes it's just easy to go hide behind the exercise, or I'm going to sit down and I'm going to get through 30 emails and then I'm going to do this and do that. We're using that as a dopamine as well.
Totally. Yeah. I think I love that you touched so highly on self-awareness, because we can't even necessarily use like bumpers that Nick teaches and such. We can't actually use those unless we are like the very pinnacle of all of this is being honest about what we really want in life. And I think most likely the reason that is so hard for myself included is because of the ideas and all these other definitions of success that we've created of what we think other people want of us. And so if we let that to the side, and even like as you're speaking, Cal, like in a moment to ask myself, what do I want to do right now? And often it's like the first thought is, well, I need to do all of these different things that make me feel productive and important. But success is also personally relative. Like, success is not this just blanket statement that you can say you're successful if you're a 7-figure entrepreneur and it's on autopilot. That's so not relevant. That is not what everyone actually wants. It's what we've taught ourselves to think that we want through spending so much time on the internet. And so the ability to actually sit in silence and be honest about what we want is the ultimate real work that we're doing of self-awareness that you speak of. And I actually talked about this quite a bit in the beginning of starting LunaDen when we were doing Solvable Problem is, we had this dream life calculator that Callie created. And it's like this map of like financially how you're going to create the dream life that you want. But I think that unless we took that even further to this still place within ourselves of without what other people think of me, and even a way I've practiced it myself is like, without my life existing on social media, what do I actually care about? Like, if no one else is watching and this isn't about anyone else but me, what is it that I really want for myself? And that is really hard to do. And I'm just going to leave it at that. That is really hard to do. So
Well, that's why, well, see, I think you guys, tell me if you've experienced different, but the first few weeks of CCA are really uncomfortable. Like it can be a punch and it can feel almost like you're sick to your stomach to some degree, because again, it's easy. We've all been in different masterminds or coaching programs or whatever, like things that are, reading entrepreneur books or business books, like things. It's easy to come into a group, like you said, Cal, and just be like you're all like, it's the same stuff. It's like 7 figures or whatever. Like, it's easy to just come in and just be very surface and like, all talk about that stuff. It's another thing to come in and be like, to a place where it's like, well, actually, well, what do you want? Like, none of that stuff really matters. What do you actually want? And then you're kind of like, well, I want 7, but you kind of know, like, when it's not really true. And then you have to start reflecting and you're like, well, I don't know if I know what I want. And then do I even know what I want? And then you start going through this, like, I don't know who I am, or, all this like stuff, what did I just build for the last 10 years? Like, does this even matter? Do I even want this? What does this like mean? Like, and it's like really difficult and uncomfortable. And a lot of times that's where, like, some people may struggle if you're not willing to go through that, you're probably going to really struggle, say, for example, in CCA. And maybe that's why there's not really any marketing or any kind of like trying to convince people to like move forward and things like that. Because if you're going to come with that same kind of really surface level thingy, it's really, you have to be willing. And Cal, you used the word vulnerable. Like it's a total misfit group, right? We get together and it's like, actually the last dinner we were at, we were in Seattle and we went out to dinner at this like I forget, the Capitol Grill, a nice steak place. And Douglas James got us this like private room and stuff, whatever. And we were having a great time. Everyone's laughing and stuff. And the waitress came in and she's like, what is this? Like, this is a weird group of people. Like, it's just like older people, younger people, like different races, like did not look like a group of people that would be hanging out together, right? Because it's like so different. But we're like having such a great time. I think that's part of it, is everyone's just like so open with who they are, like how totally different. Some people with kids, some people married, some people not, like totally different things. And that vulnerability of just like being okay. Like, I mean, how many people do you meet to think about your life? How many people do you actually know that are like totally okay with like who they are and like fine with it if they want something, different than what the media or whatever else their friends or their neighborhood are saying that they want,
I think the word I used in the beginning was safe. It's a safe environment to be self-aware. And it's, whether even I got disarmed right away with the valid over useful, that's intentional. You create a group that then is there to feel safe and support and expedites the learning process. That was, Ben, you said it's uncomfortable in the beginning, and I know Courtney, you'd agree. It's like, yeah, I mean, that could be 5 weeks, it could be the entire course for somebody, but it is like, you don't go figure it out, leave it open loop. Like, we're all trying to solve for X, we're all trying to figure it out right away. And like your question of like, oh, what do I want? Don't figure it out, just leave it open. That's where that some, we get disarmed right away, and it's like, okay. And then you start picking up getting a little bit more comfortable in that. And sharing that experience with people, not being like, I'm the outlier here. It's like, no, a lot of us have been, this is a cultivated experience. This is a filtered down group of people that we get to share that experience, and then expedites our learning process.
Yeah, I think even so, like that, being able to sit with not knowing what we want. And then, I mean, even in my experience, I think I spent a good chunk of time wanting to know if it was okay to like be not only be who I am, but want something that felt so polarizing opposite to what I've like told myself I've wanted my entire life. And that brings up another principle within that we talk a lot about, which is consensus, and like needing the room, like needing everyone else on board before you even like consolidate that within yourself. But from what you're sharing about like vulnerability and being in a safe place, I think unless and until we allow that within ourselves, can we even create these environments and be in rooms full of people who are doing that same thing? Because it's not like we're in this community because we're seeking permission from everyone else. Like, we've gone on that we've gone and are continuously going on that journey of that uncomfortable, like, what is it that I actually care about? Who really am I? And the ability to do that is what allows and creates for communities like this. Because I've even been around like PD and the guys, and people will ask them like, what, how the heck do you guys have such a weirdly connected friendship? Like, it's weird, but you're so connected. And I think it all started there, is that, I mean, exactly what we're speaking about, like that self-awareness is what creates this room of people, and our ability to come together and actually be vulnerable. And I say that because, you said it is a safe environment, Cal. And while that is true, I think our ability to actually like accept these things about ourselves is what creates that space in the room. Because a lot of CCA, it's on us. Like, there's a lot of teaching and content, right? And there's a lot that they give us in that way. But I would say at least half, if not more, is what we make of it. Like, not just the case in point in the 6-word updates, but also like everything else that happens off of the calls is up to us. So yeah.
It starts to permeate outside of let's say outside of our CCA. It starts to affect the people you live with, your friends. For me, my businesses, like, we start speaking the same language and these principles, and it just keeps spreading out and becoming I just like a language. And that's where I talk about the immersion. Like, in it, it's the difference is it's learning a foreign language, like a word out of a book, and saying it versus the word out of the book. Now you wrote about how you might use it, then you went to that country and you actually used it, and now you're affecting the people on the trip that you're with. It's just like I don't know,
maybe
it's more of a lifestyle than a learned lesson. Like, you start to live the CCA.
Would you give some examples of that, Cal, of you actually doing that? Like, and maybe you've been too, because that was something I touched of high importance, as you both know, before we started, is how are we not just consuming information, but embedding it into the way that we live?
Right. Just I'll just align versus agree. In our entire business, just 2 words, how much they can transform the way that, I'll save us the time of diving in deep into it, but like how much that can change. Or in some of our service in some of the service companies, we do really high-end work, and we're the outcome versus result, those 2 words. On the sales end, like, person might question, like, how come, you got the guys were only here for 5 days, how come it costs us much money? And being able to implement that right away. And then I didn't even notice, like, then I start walking into my own places of businesses, and they're speaking the language of the CCA. So that's would be the best example of how it kind of permeates out, and through management too. My goal here is, once I start catching up on all my notes, is to actually, the first people I'm going to share and teach this with is my people. I'm going to start a group we're just going to learn some of the principles, and more than we've already learned just from talking about. Does that help?
Yeah. And for me, and I got my dog in here. In fact, my very masculine dog in the background.
Oh, that's real.
Hopefully it's not barking.
Sometimes a statue.
Oh no, yeah. But for me, I know it's been a lot of it. I want to also apply a lot of it. I know Cal and some of the other business owners have been applying it a lot with their staff and in their businesses, teaching their people, which is something that I still am rolling out. But I know for me, a lot of it initially was very much internal and personal. And so closer over more is what stands out to me the most. And Cal, we're different in our unique disposition, but similar in the fact that I was constantly like thinking bigger, more, like I needed, like, to your point, like Courtney, like there was a point where it's like, there was a point in my life where it's like, oh, if I could have $1 million business, then I would, whatever. And then but then you get there and you're like, oh, look, if I could have a $10 million business, then, whatever. And so like every like the opportunity or like sniff of something bigger, or like a big, like purchase, build a facility, whatever, like all, hire more people, all these things. Like I was just like, I would go for that every time, you know what I mean? And you talk about, blowing yourself up at some point, most likely, especially again, it depends, right? They always say it depends but then when you actually start and you do that for 10 years, and then you actually start to say, well, like, is this what I want? But is this actually what I want? For example, Joyce and I have a business together, and our marriage is very important to us. We have two young kids. And it's like, is this what we actually want? Does this actually get us closer to what we want? Trying to go 10x in this thing, or try to add another location, or like these types of things. And I never had that filter before with those decisions, that I would end up you could end up so far deep into something, or so stretched across something, that you don't even know where to go. And now as these things come up, like these thought processes are coming in first, and I'm okay with like, not rushing to move forward, or desperately trying to like get this next bigger thing. And the interesting thing about that is, like, the more I've had that restraint and like been like, well, I don't know if I'm really interested in that, the more opportunities actually have been coming. It's this weird thing to even, because it sounds like woo-woo or whatever, like it's hard to even kind of explain, but it starts that when you don't have this desperation chasing for like to prove more, growth, that kind of stuff, it actually, more things even start to open up that maybe you just weren't seeing before, because you're like locked in on like how this has to be.
Some optionality. We're more monsters, Ben. Like that's what we use. Yeah, there's so much, like just reach for more. That's how you get more. But it does get you closer. That I'm still like tailoring for myself. The understanding of that, again, it's infinite. But that goes to being self-aware. I'm knowing, just realizing that you're more monster. Sorry, I'm projecting that on you, but I am. And that's the point of this. It's not just, oh, I know that now. It's, no, I live that now. That filter that you have now for yourself will change the trajectory of your life.
Absolutely.
To give weight to what you learn. Like that's the difference in like CCA versus anything else I've ever experienced. It's not something that now I know that I can apply that. It's like, it's a lifestyle adoption.
Yeah, which is fine. It totally brings back to the very beginning of relearning how to learn. It is so different than most ways of learning and teaching. Like I'm sure I've talked about this on the Lunadin channel before, is like, I so thought most of my life that learning meant this way of comprehension where you have it perfectly laid out in your brain because you know it so well, like it's recitable. And that's a whole other conversation that Renee is really great at with the schooling system. But unlearning all of that was like the preface for me to actually learn, where it becomes a way of being versus a way of reciting. And that is very parallel to what you were saying, Cal, about useful versus valid. Like, that's great if you can go into a room full of people and be like, I know all the information, but how great is it really in relations to this whole concept of getting closer to what actually matters in our life? And I think that the big piece of that is the like discomfort of being honest with ourselves when we realize we're not actually getting closer. We're not actually, because first, if we're unsure of what it is we really want, how could we even measure? Like, more is just more of a filter. Like, more just becomes more denial of what we actually want. More just becomes like more reasons to not look at what really matters to us. And so getting back to that like very pinnacle root of like, okay, I'm going to be willing to remove all of that and just kind of be with the possibilities of like being okay with not knowing what it is, and then B, being the possibility of it being something different allows us to then learn differently, like you were saying, increasing optionality, by just like freeing up some space and not like being on that go grind all the time. And I can totally resonate with you sharing that earlier in the conversation. It's a very easy, I think it's just like an easy cop-out way of acting in our lives so that we don't have to face what is actually happening. So
where I think back on right away, one big realization for me is just the acceptance that we'll just say attach the word more. What does more mean? More money, more revenue? That's initially where all of us entrepreneurs go right away. It's like, well, more is more money. That's the metric we're striving for. For me, that was a big win to say, hey, no, we're talking about optionality, risk, opportunity, as a currency, time, energy, and then money. So now that's going to reframe what more might look like, or what closer might look like, rather. I think we're just hardwired. 95% of books are going to tell you, it's all about the revenue is what you are looking for. The revenue is what you're going for, but you're giving up all these other things if you follow this 100x approach or this approach. It's the grind. Yeah, that was just kind of as you
could be going in the wrong direction. I think that's what, again, Dan and Nick, and the way that you kind of touched on it, Courtney, is that, again, they lead from a place of being, right? And all these things that we talk about, like, first of all, how different are they, right? Like, you have, like, Dan's hair is always perfect, for example. Nick's usually looks like he got out of bed, kind of thing, you know what I mean?
So different.
Yet they're teaching this together. Dan has an accounting background in finance, and like serious numbers, and the way that he presents something is totally different than Nick, like, who's just kind of stream of consciousness and things like that. But they're showing you, and Dan will share very personal examples too of how he's applied these things for example as well to his own business, to his life, with his daughters and things like that as well. And that's what's, like, again, like you said, Cal, just now, is that I've been in a lot of other business and coaching and mastermind programs. It's so easy to just come in. It's like, okay, everyone, let's figure out how you can 10x your revenue. You know what I mean? And it's like, we never stop to say, like it's way harder to start a program with like a bunch of different people and to find out what everyone actually wants, which is totally different. And then, like, figure out how towards moving closer to that. It's like way easier to say, what's your revenue now? And, like, how do we 10x that or whatever? You know what I mean? That's a pretty simple, like, but then you're doing something that is like getting you in the opposite direction of what you actually want to do, and making you like more, miserable potentially, and then, yeah. So, but the interesting part about all of this is that what I think is hard for us to accept is that it actually, like, we think that if we just do what makes us happy, like, we have this underlying belief that it's like, I'm just going to be a lazy, good for nothing, like, sit on the couch, that, versus like an actually, like, when you see it actually play out with the people that are just being, I mean, you mentioned PD, Courtney, too, like, he's shared some, stuff similar to this too, like, actually how things open up that you couldn't have thought of, or whatever, of levels of success or proximity or relationships or things like that, versus like grinding in the other direction. And just having that openness to being receptive to what actually is going to come from you being your true self is that's the hardest step of faith, I think, to take.
Yeah, I think it's like letting go of how you thought it had to be or was supposed to be. It's like this rigid control mentality. And the way I heard it from Nick that I really loved was being certain that I will get what I want, but being uncertain of the how. Like, the uncertain of the how is the superpower. And that like letting go, like letting your foot off the e-brake. Like, there's so many different ways I could say this. That is so challenging. It's been so challenging for myself because it causes you to, a lot of the other instances we're talking about, like, let time do work for you, let options open up. And that's where I found myself getting really, really stuck consistently, was like trying to make it all work so perfectly with this really weird plan that in real life never actually works, because life happens. And how the heck do we know what's going to happen in the next hour from now? Like, we don't have the capabilities as human beings to predict everything to come. And so when we can recognize that and be open to different possibilities that our mind can make up, like, it will allow for that success that we're certain of to open up a lot quicker and a lot easier. And I also want to touch on this, like, money not necessarily being a bad thing to have more of. But the question that really hit me was, it's similar to it depends, was like, and then what? So if I get all of this more that I'm chasing, then what is that going to mean for my life? And if I believe that it's actually going to create a happier me, I'm looking at life through a very backwards lens. It's the belief that the more that I have, the happier I become, as opposed to, and it is woo-woo, but it is true, like manifestation being the model of like, I be the person, I do the action, and then I acquire the thing. So that's my take on that as well.
Absolutely.
Living this is, I'm going to keep bringing it back to this because my real testimony in this, and this is maybe what the whole reason I was asked, was I'm not even close to where and what's going to open up for me. And now I know that. Like maybe the first couple CCAs, I'm like, okay, yeah, I got that. And then I hear it again, and I hear it again in frequency. And then I start to realize like every time I hear it, it's different. And I'm this way of living, not just knowing, is, yeah, I'm just starting to get comfortable with letting that stuff go, hiding behind that more, and hiding behind that identity. I can't wait to see where I am, just because of what's been implemented from the CCA, where I'm in 6 months or 6 weeks or a week from now. It changes so significantly just by living it. I guess the main takeaway is like, I'm not even close to where I'll be. Like, just, I'm excited for allowing this space for me to be myself and let the optionality come, and trusting in, yeah, I'm going to get there. I just don't know exactly what the path looks like right now. That would be, I think that's the biggest thing for me in the CCA, is like every week it changed so significantly for me, and it's not going to leave me in one spot. I have the arsenal, we'll say, to keep pushing this forward into exactly what you guys are saying. Hope I'm not confusing it too much, but
Not at all.
I love it. Ben, do you have anything else you want to touch on, or questions that you wanted to ask Cal?
No, I don't think so. I'm really grateful that Cal was able to share was willing to share his story with everyone, and things. I know it's been really meaningful for the cohort and the group, and yeah, I think that my takeaway, even just from Cal just talking now, is that, like you said, it's a new, Dan uses the word operating system, right? Right, and Nick says toolbox, right, for example. So it's a new way of being. That's what we've talked about this whole time. It's not just like I learned how to do this thing in my business.
I don't know if it's me or
It might have been me. Oh,
okay.
is it Ben?
No, it might be Ben.
Okay, I thought it was me.
While we're
Ben,
waiting for
are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, we
Okay.
lost you for a second.
Okay.
The new operating
I
system.
said something so profound that it's never
No.
recovered again. No, I was saying that Cal just helped cement it for me too. Is it's an operating system or a toolbox. It's a new way of being, not just something we've learned and moved on to, like this tactical thing. And you said, for example, every time you reread it or go over it, it lands different, because you're a different person each time that you're a different person, but you're also more true to yourself every time you go through a different lens that you're looking through. So it's something that stays with you. And so it's exciting, like you said, because every time you're using that operating system, new things are opening up that you never saw before. And so you don't know and you said, Courtney, like uncertainty, you don't know what's coming next, but you're certain that it's going to be exciting.
It's what is it? The pills in the Matrix. You get to choose to see how it really is.
Yeah.
If you wanted to, I forget the color of the pills, but that's kind of,
it's the red or the blue that you're supposed to take, that you take. I don't remember which one.
yeah, you take the one and then you get this new operating system, and yeah, it is exciting. but it's like something that now that you're like, I don't want to go without.
Yeah, totally. I'm really grateful. I'm really grateful to have both of you on because you kept touching on vulnerability, Cal, and I very much appreciate having humans in my life who operate from vulnerability, even when it's uncomfortable. So I as well appreciate you sharing your story. I've heard like little bits and pieces. So yeah, I appreciate you bringing that into this conversation and allowing us to learn from your own lived experience, because that's huge. And it's always just good to, I think we've been done with cohort 2 for some time now, but in tied with the infinite game, like we're just still learning and still on this journey. And it's really great to be able to do that with other like authentic and good people. So
And look at it still going, like right now, this is a perfect example. Like it just continues, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Any lasting thoughts from either of you before we wrap up? Anything you want to leave for people who may not be in CCA and have no clue anything we're talking about in this language is like, but
Yeah, I guess the thing I would leave is it's a full immersion. It's a completely new way of learning. Like just the amount of weeks that you put in the CCA could just be based around this way of learning. For me, it's so impactful. And as important to not only the lessons and the principles you learn, it is the environment. And this thing is just designed perfectly to get the results it's getting. So it's like nothing I've ever experienced. I'll leave it at that.
love it.
And it's life changing.
Love it. Ben, what about you?
Yeah, I think I guess the final takeaway that comes to my mind is that I know the hardest thing I think about CCA is when you're not in it, like to understand what it is or if it is right for you or that kind of thing. I know that for me, I knew Nick and Dan from before, and Dan's been our accountant. His business has been our accounting firm for a while, so I was able to reach out to them because I was like, well, I don't know if CCA is really right for me and our business because we're a brick and mortar, work with kids. Like I didn't understand if it's like for people with like financial firms or like things, like clients of, that type of stuff, because there's a lot of very specific principles you can apply to investing or like things like that. And so I didn't quite get it. So I would say hopefully from this call, people can understand it's, whether and there's some exciting, I think, projects and collaborations and things coming from these principles, whether I know we're going to be working on applying some of these principles for youth sports, for example. So whether you're like an athlete or a business owner, or not everyone needs to be a business owner or an entrepreneur, right? Or, I mean, these things apply to a lot of times some of the most powerful. I mean, we have people that cry every time in the summits and stuff, sharing things. And a lot of times it's something about their marriage or about their parenting or something like that. So the biggest takeaway is that it's larger than some of the business tactics and things like that. And I think there will be some, I know Dan's book's coming out soon, and I know Nick Smith is being made available free now as well, which is kind of a good introduction to some CCA principles. So I know there are some resources coming, and obviously the trainings you're doing through LunaDan. So there's resources coming for people to kind of explore a little bit more and understand before, without being in that, the full cohort type experience. So I'm excited about that, like diffusion. You're diffusing it, Courtney. A lot of people are starting to help to do that with their communities, where that people can start to apply those principles even if they're not in a CCA cohort, and then if that brings them along to the point where they join a full-on cohort.
Yeah, and for those in the Wolf Den, as we talked, Ben, in our interview, obviously there will be more access and things that you're doing in the Wolf Den, and then in time we'll be adding the Luna Den to some of that as well. So there are really a lot of great other resources right now, even if you're not within the actual CCA community, to just start to understand how this can be applicable to your life. And I do agree, it's not always business. For me, it was very little was business. And I think the bulk chunk of it is like the personal way of being that gets to change. And you can see how it can be input into any area of your life that you want to. Like that's totally and completely up to you. So yeah, this truly can be for anyone who kind of fits within the realm of what we were speaking about, like the openness to learning a different way. So thank you both so much for coming on. I have so much fun with you guys. And yeah, I just appreciate it. Appreciate all your wisdom, life experience. It's been really great. So
Thank you.
Thank you,
We'll
Courtney.
wrap
And
it up
you are the expert interviewer. So let's get that
No,
straight.
no. This is not true. This is not true. But I appreciate that. And I think what I'm gonna do is just, it's a lot more fun having someone else here. So I'm just gonna kind of recruit you, and you're gonna have to do this more often. So
Okay. Yeah, sounds good.
okay. And for those of you who watch, make sure you leave your takeaway 6-word updates. If you don't know what that is, it's just 6 words. A takeaway in 6 words to condense, so we can all learn from each other. It's really powerful when someone else reads what you learn. They're going to get their own, a totally different takeaway that they may not have if you don't. So we appreciate it, and put it in the comments below.